Chapter 1. My boyfriend is Ethan Montgomery, a high society heir. He's always been arrogant and unruly, throwing money around like it's nothing, and he's never had a shortage of women around him. But he's been by my side for 3 years, and during that time he was well behaved. He even proposed to me. Recently, however, he found a new obsession. A beautiful young university student, fair-skinned, with the air of a cool, elegant beauty. He has an irresistible weakness for this type of innocent and kind girl. To make her happy, on my birthday, he pushed me into the ocean without a second thought. The sky today was a vast, cloudless blue. The calm water erupted with a huge splash as I thrashed about, looking up at the group of people on the yacht with utter despair. Standing at the edge of the yacht was a girl in a white dress. Her eyes were pure and bright. Seeing my wretched, waterlogged state, she raised a hand to her lips and broke into a radiant smile. It was a beautiful smile. Ethan smiled along with her. His laughter was hearty, smoothing the lines on his brow. By the time he heard my cries for help, I was already starting to sink. The sensation of drowning was suffocating. I nearly drowned as a child and have been terrified of water ever since. I was against having my birthday party on a yacht, but I couldn't resist Ethan's persistent pleading and eventually agreed. But when I arrived, I found that besides our usual friends, there was a strange girl. She was stunningly beautiful. Ethan doted on her, pouring her a drink first, cutting her fruit first, and giving her the first slice of cake. His attentiveness was overwhelming, but it was an attentiveness he hadn't shown me in a very long time. I immediately sensed something was wrong, but I never suspected him. Not until he pushed me into the ocean. Then I was sure. Ethan's heart had changed. He watched me slowly sink, leisurely lifting his sunglasses to rest on his head. He squinted at my flailing form in the water and mocked me. "Sienna, you can't actually be a landlubber, can you? Stop the act and get back up here. You've made Crystal laugh, so you can drop the performance now." The laughter was piercing. "Mr. Montgomery, I don't think she can actually swim." One of his friends realized something was wrong and shouted, quickly tossing a lifebuoy in my direction, but my body was already sinking fast. "Save her, Sienna." The scene devolved into chaos. Several people worked together to pull me back onto the yacht, but even after multiple rounds of CPR, I didn't wake up. My body grew colder and colder. Only then did panic set in for Ethan. He rushed me to the hospital and into the emergency room. It took a team of doctors over 2 hours to bring me back. When the doctor announced that my life was no longer in danger, Ethan let out a long sigh of relief. If anything had actually happened, he would have been a murderer. He loved to play, but he didn't want to go to prison. It wasn't until the next day that I woke up in a hospital bed. Staring at the ceiling, the scent of disinfectant filling my nostrils, my mind was a fog. The moment I moved, a throbbing pain shot through my head. I raised a hand to my forehead and let out a soft groan. Ethan, who had just returned to the room, saw that I was awake and rushed to my side. He grabbed my hand excitedly. "Sienna, you're finally awake. You were out all night. I was starting to think you'd never wake up." I violently snatched my hand back and stared at him, my brow furrowed in confusion. "Who are you?" Chapter 2. "Sienna, are you joking with me?" "I'm your boyfriend, Ethan Montgomery," Ethan said with a laugh, reaching for my hand again. But when he saw the terror in my eyes, he assumed I was faking it, and his tone grew impatient. "Look, I was wrong to push you into the ocean, but you don't have to be like this. You're fine now, aren't you?" "Boyfriend? What are you talking about? My boyfriend is Julian Rhodes." I threw his hand off and clutched a pillow to my chest, my gaze sharp and wary. "I didn't know him at all. What? Who did you say is your boyfriend?" Ethan's eyes instantly became bloodshot. He slammed his fist on the bedside table and roared in fury. Julian Rhodes was his sworn enemy. He had been since they were kids. He had always lost to Julian Rhodes, and he hated him with a passion. His name was not to be mentioned. I looked around the empty hospital room, then at the enraged Ethan advancing toward me. I screamed in alarm, "Don't touch me, I don't know you." My shout brought a doctor running. Seeing how strongly I recoiled from Ethan, a nurse escorted him out of the room and told him to wait outside. The doctor performed a series of checks and asked me many questions. Afterward, he told me to rest. Ethan stood by the door the whole time. After a few moments, he had calmed down. The second the doctor came out, he rushed forward. "Doctor, what's wrong with my girlfriend? Why doesn't she recognize me?" She even thinks some other guy is her boyfriend. Her brain has likely suffered trauma, causing memory confusion. It might resolve itself over time. For now, try not to agitate her." The doctor's words were a warning. Ethan didn't believe a word of it. How could she have forgotten only him? The moment the doctor left, he burst back into the room and pinned me to the bed, his face contorted with rage. "I just pushed you into the ocean. Is that any reason to fake amnesia?" Hearing the commotion, several nurses rushed in and managed to pull him away. "What kind of boyfriend are you? Stop agitating her, do that again, and she might never remember you for the rest of her life," a nurse warned Ethan, glancing through the small window in the door at me cowering on the bed. Ethan scoffed, unfazed. He wanted to see how long I could keep up this act. Before long, my parents arrived at the hospital. Fearing that his actions would be exposed, Ethan hadn't even told them I was in the hospital. The Montgomery family was indeed powerful in the city, but the Shaw family's influence was not to be underestimated. More importantly, Montgomery Corp currently needed my father's investment, and I was their chief architect. Ethan needed my family's resources, and he needed my professional skills. "Sir, ma'am, look at Sienna. She's putting on such a convincing act, even pretending not to know me. She just scratched my arm a minute ago," Ethan complained to my parents with a strained smile. My parents were terrified. They rushed to my bedside and pointed to themselves. "Sienna, do you still recognize us?" They were afraid I had forgotten them too. "Dad, Mom, what are you talking about? Of course I know who you are," I said with a small smile, seeing their anxious expressions. They both breathed a sigh of relief. Then, looking at my pale and haggard face, their eyes filled with heartache. My mother stroked my cheek. "Sienna, the doctor told me you nearly drowned and they worked all night to save you. I thought you were afraid of the water. Why would you go to the ocean?" But as Ethan walked back into the room, I shrieked and hid behind my parents. "Dad, Mom, that man is a psycho, don't let him touch me." Chapter 3. "He says he's my boyfriend, but my boyfriend is Julian Rhodes." I insisted, gripping my mother's hand tightly, my gaze unwavering. My parents' expressions froze. They took out their phones, showing me photo after photo. They quickly discovered that I had only forgotten Ethan and that I was convinced Julian was my boyfriend. Ethan, however, couldn't have cared less. The day I was discharged from the hospital, he went to take Crystal Vance out for a meal. He had asked her out many times, and this was the first time she had agreed. He didn't hesitate, driving his expensive sports car to her university to pick her up, causing quite a stir on campus. Once in the car, Crystal shot Ethan a cool glance, maintaining her usual pure and ethereal demeanor. "Is your girlfriend all right?" she asked softly. "What could be wrong with her?" "She's got tough luck," Ethan replied, fawning over her. That afternoon, he took her to several luxury boutiques, spending millions of dollars. He ended the day by taking her to the most expensive restaurant in the city for a candlelit dinner. But when he dropped her off at the university gates, she refused all the luxury gifts he'd bought her. Ethan was completely captivated by this kind of girl. He couldn't calm his excitement. He felt his passion returning, his heart pounding. That night, he took his buddies to a bar to celebrate. Some of them congratulated him, wishing him luck in winning Crystal over. But his good friend, Jasper Gray, looked grim. "Ethan, aren't you about to marry Sienna? Isn't this unfair to her? Besides, she just got out of the hospital. Shouldn't you be with her?" Jasper reminded him. Ethan raised an eyebrow at that, letting out a dismissive scoff. "If a man doesn't have his fun before marriage, when will he? I've been holding back for 3 years, and I've finally found someone who's my type. Don't ruin this for me, man." His tone was utterly nonchalant. The others at the table laughed, all in agreement. "Aren't you afraid Sienna will really forget you?" Jasper pressed, frowning. Ethan had just lifted a glass to his lips. He paused, his expression hardening slightly before he sneered, "Forget me? Have you seen the way she used to grovel over me? Would she dare? And so what if she forgets? I've been sick of her trampy act for a long time now." Jasper frantically tried to get his attention, tugging at his sleeve. But Ethan shook him off and finally let out all the words he had been holding back for so long. "That prissy, holier-than-thou act of Sienna's can't even compare to Crystal." Ethan's tone was flippant and full of scorn. Jasper pointed behind him and whispered urgently, "Sienna." Ethan froze mid-sentence. He whipped his head around and saw me standing right behind him. He was so startled he started to stutter. See, Sienna, you were just discharged today, weren't you? What are you doing at a bar? He dropped his glass, stood up, and walked toward me, forcing a strained smile. I swept a cold gaze over him, completely indifferent to his words. Ethan was taken aback by my calm, detached expression. If I had heard him say something like that before, I would have started a huge fight with him, probably stormed off and left home. But this time, I didn't cry or scream. I just looked at him as if he were a complete stranger. Sienna, he called out my name again. My lips curved into a smile as I looked in his direction, my hazel eyes lighting up. Seeing this, Ethan thought I wasn't angry and started to walk toward me. But I moved past him, running straight toward a man in a black suit. I threw my arms around him in a tight hug and shouted with a laugh, "Jules, I've missed you so much." Chapter 4. Julian Rhodes smelled of a light, crisp men's cologne mixed with the scent of alcohol. I wrapped my arms tightly around his lean waist, my eyes traveling past the sexy bob of his Adam's apple to meet his deep, dark gaze. "Jules," I called out, my voice as sweet as honey. The man looked down at me, his pupils constricting as a flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes. "Let go of her." Ethan, seeing us embrace, turned red with rage. He rushed over, pulled me away from Julian, and hurled insults at me. "Sienna, are you a slut? You have a boyfriend and you're still hitting on other men." Startled by his crude and baseless accusation, I shook off his hand and hid behind Julian. "Jules, this man is a psycho. He's been following me for ages. I'm scared." My hand trembled as I clutched the hem of his suit jacket, my voice laced with fear. The word psycho made Ethan completely lose it. In front of the entire bar, he pointed at me and yelled, "Sienna, are you done with this act? So I pushed you into the ocean, so what? You're fine now, aren't you? Is that any reason to fake amnesia? Julian Rhodes is not your boyfriend, I am." The bar patrons erupted in murmurs. After that incident, everyone in the city knew that I had forgot my high society fiancé. Not long ago, Ethan had live-streamed his proposal to me. No one could have predicted this turn of events. "You're lying. Julian Rhodes is my boyfriend." I clung to Julian's jacket, my eyes resolute, showing no hint of doubt or deceit. Julian's gaze flickered with surprise. He turned his head to look at me, his expression unreadable as his dark eyes scanned my face. Seeing us look at each other sent a fresh wave of jealousy through Ethan. He lunged forward to drag me away, but I held onto Julian for dear life, my eyes welling up with tears. "Help me, Jules, I don't want to go with this psycho." Hearing this, Ethan's anger boiled over and he slapped me across the face. A searing pain spread across my cheek. I froze, stunned. "Sienna, there's a limit to your sluttiness." Ethan continued to berate me. My expression turned to ice. With all the strength I could muster, I slapped him back. "You imposter, what right do you have to hit me?" I was furious. It was the first time in my life anyone had ever laid a hand on me. Ethan raised his hand to strike me again, but Julian grabbed my hand, pulled me into his arms, and kicked Ethan to the ground. "What kind of man hits a woman?" he growled, his eyes cold and menacing. With that, Julian took my hand and led me out of the bar. Ethan tried to follow, but Jasper Gray stopped him, pulling him back to the sofa. "Don't stop me, I'm going to teach that adulterer Rhodes a lesson." Ethan was seething, the veins in his neck bulging. He had never been so humiliated, especially not in front of so many people. Before this, he was the untouchable heir of the Montgomery family. "Ethan, that's enough," Jasper said. Ethan whipped his head around to stare at him, scowling. "You're supposed to be my friend. Are you going to side with that bastard Rhodes?" "Of course I'm on your side, but can't you go a little easier on Sienna? She's your girlfriend, after all, and she just got out of the hospital. She can't handle this kind of stress," Jasper urged in a low voice. "That tramp was about to sleep with Rhodes and you want me to just take it?" Ethan couldn't contain his rage. Jasper's face hardened. "You have the nerve to talk about Sienna? Aren't you even worse?" he said, his patience finally snapping. Chapter 5. Crash. Ethan grabbed a beer bottle and smashed it over Jasper's head. Blood immediately started to flow. "Am I the same as Sienna?" "She's a woman, I'm a man," Ethan declared, utterly self-righteous. Jasper clutched his bleeding forehead and stared at his friend, his eyes filled with disappointment. "Jasper Gray doesn't have a brother like you," he said, turning and walking out of the bar without a second glance. Ethan looked completely unconcerned. He went back to drinking with the others, continuing his night of debauchery. Losing one friend, he thought, made no difference to him. The next day, the sun was just as bright. The first thing Ethan did after waking up was go see Crystal Vance, bringing the luxury goods he'd bought the other day. The girl was as cool as ever, her eyes still pure and bright. Her gaze was placid as she glanced at Ethan, who was holding luxury shopping bags in one hand and a steaming coffee in the other. She decisively took the hot coffee from his left hand. The coffee was still hot, instantly warming her palms on the cold, windy morning. Ethan's thoughtfulness was impeccable. "Did you need something, coming to see me so early in the morning?" Crystal's face remained unsmiling, but her gaze had softened considerably. "Crystal, these are for you," Ethan said with a smile, handing her the luxury bags. The sight of the bags made Crystal frown immediately. "Mr. Montgomery, you don't really think you can buy me with a few bags and some clothes, do you? What do you take me for?" Crystal took 2 steps back. "Of course not, Crystal. I know you don't care about these things. I just wanted to give you a gift. All I want is for you to be happy," Ethan said quickly. After much persuading, Crystal finally accepted the gifts. Once he had placated her and arranged their next dinner date, Ethan drove to the Shaw family home. "Sir, ma'am, what do you mean Sienna didn't come home last night?" Looking at my parents, Ethan barely managed to stop himself from cursing out loud. "Ethan, Sienna doesn't remember you right now. Please try to be patient with her," they said, their faces etched with guilt. "Ma'am, please call Sienna," Ethan said, struggling to suppress his rage. The call was made. From my mother, Ethan got the address, a room in a 5-star hotel. He was so angry he felt like his lungs would explode. He jumped in his car and sped toward the hotel. The moment he reached the room door, he started pounding on it like a madman, startling the other guests. "Sir, please calm down. If you continue, I'll have to call security," the lobby manager warned. Ethan slammed his fist against the door, directing his fury at the manager. "My girlfriend is in there sleeping with another man, and you want me to calm down?" After yelling at the manager, Ethan turned his attention back to me inside the room. "Sienna, you shameless harlot, are you too scared to open the door? Are you hiding someone in there? Did you sleep with that bastard Rhodes?" Ethan was on the verge of losing his mind. The girlfriend he had courted for 3 years, a woman he had never even touched, had been slept with by another man. He was going to kill the adulterous pair the door didn't open. Instead, the police arrived. Only when the police were there did I dare to open the door. Seeing the crazed, ranting Ethan, I hid behind an officer and pointed. "This man is a psycho, I don't know him, but he keeps harassing me every day." Ethan's rage hit its peak. His eyes were bloodshot as he shoved past the officers blocking his way and stormed into the room, looking ready to commit murder. "That bastard Rhodes must be in here." Chapter 6, he tore the room apart, but there was no trace of another man. Still unconvinced, he spun around, grabbed me by the collar, and roared, "Where did you hide that adulterer Rhodes?" His terrifying demeanor made a sharp pain shoot through my head. The police rushed forward to pull him off me. I collapsed to the floor, clutching my head. My face turned deathly pale as I cried out in agony, "It hurts, my head hurts so much." With that, I fainted. "This lady checked in alone last night." "There's a limit to making false accusations, sir," the lobby manager said, glaring at Ethan as he quickly called for an ambulance. Ethan froze. Seeing me lying motionless on the floor, he began to panic. He tried to follow the paramedics to the hospital, but before he could take 2 steps, the police detained him. "Sienna," his voice softened as he watched me being loaded into the ambulance. But the police gave him no time for sentimentality. They took him to the station for a stern lecture, and he wasn't released until that afternoon. The moment he got out, he rushed to the hospital. The second my father saw him, he slapped him across the face, his eyes red with fury. "Look what you've done to my daughter, and you still have the nerve to show your face. Are you trying to kill her?" "Sir, Ethan had just started to speak when I cut him off. "Dad, I don't want to see this psycho. I want Jules. I want to see Jules," I cried from under the covers. Julian Rhodes was Ethan's trigger point, and he exploded. "Sienna, I'm your boyfriend," he roared. That's what I used to call him, but now I was using the name of his mortal enemy. He couldn't stand it. My mother, seeing him yelling again, pulled him outside. Her eyes were red. "Ethan, please, don't agitate Sienna anymore. She has amnesia. She can't remember you." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, forcing down his anger. His phone vibrated. The fire in his chest was still raging, but the moment he saw the message, his brow smoothed and a small smile appeared. It was from Crystal Vance, asking him to go to the movies that night. From my hospital bed, I glanced at him, but he wasn't looking at me. He said a quick word to my mother and rushed out of the hospital. He had arrived empty-handed, and he left empty-handed without so much as a backward glance. I looked away, relieved, and lay back down. As I was drifting off to sleep, I felt a cool touch on my cheek. My eyes snapped open, instantly wary. But the person in front of me wasn't Ethan, it was Julian. My eyes lit up. I threw myself at him with a smile. "Jules, I knew you cared about me. You left me all alone last night. I thought you didn't want me as your girlfriend anymore." Julian's eyes narrowed slightly as he reached out to steady my wobbly form. My parents walked in from outside, both stunned to see Julian. "Mr. Rhodes, what brings you here?" my father asked respectfully. Julian Rhodes was a major player in the city. He came from a wealthy family and was a business mogul. Under his leadership, Rhodes Corp had managed to completely suppress Montgomery Corp in just 3 years. Even Ethan's father had to schedule an appointment to see him. Julian lowered his gaze, hesitating for a moment before looking up at my parents. "I have a friend who was hospitalized," he said calmly. "I happened to see Sienna was here, so I came to check on her." My father saw no flaw in his story and nodded with a smile. But my mother noticed the food container and the roses on the table. She walked over and saw the fragrant aroma of food wafting from inside. "Julian," she said, surprised, "what's all this?" At her question, a flicker of panic crossed Julian's dark, calm eyes. "I just picked it up on the way," he said quietly. "After all, Sienna and I were university classmates." Hearing this, I immediately retorted, "What do you mean, university classmates? You're my boyfriend." Chapter 7, I threw my arms around his neck, took out my phone, and snapped a picture just as I kissed his cheek. The moment my lips touched his skin, Julian's pupils contracted slightly. "I have to post this on my social media, otherwise you'll run off," I said. Before he could react, I had quickly posted the photo and then nonchalantly opened the food container he had brought. The rich aroma of food filled the air. It was all still steaming. I realized it was all my favorite dishes from my university days. Braised fish, lion's head, meatballs, and an assortment of other meat and vegetable dishes, all beautifully arranged. I glanced at the other insulated container, opened it, and found it was pork rib soup. Looking at all this food, I felt a lump in my throat and my eyes began to sting. But the feeling passed in an instant, and I was back to normal. My mother watched me eat with delight, her eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at Julian. "Julian, you're so thoughtful. We were just about to ask Sienna what she wanted to eat, and you've already brought it." "It's no trouble, ma'am," Julian replied with a polite smile. While I was eating, my parents quietly pulled Julian aside. "Julian, Sienna had an accident recently and has mistaken you for Ethan. We're sorry for any trouble she's caused you. You don't have to play along." "We'll handle it," my mother said softly. "It's no trouble," Julian said without hesitation. However, he didn't stay long. He took a phone call and headed back to his company. The next day, the photo of me and Julian spread like wildfire across social media. Ethan saw it, too. He had just woken up in a hotel room, still savoring the memory of his passionate kiss with Crystal Vance the night before. He felt a slight regret that he hadn't managed to seal the deal, but it only served to prove her innocence and charm. Comparing the two, Crystal was thousands of times better than Sienna, thousands of times more pure and kind. Just as he was thinking this, his phone started vibrating uncontrollably. He picked it up and saw a flood of messages from people telling him to check his social media feed. He tapped on the app, and his eyes widened in disbelief. Crash, he smashed the phone to pieces, clenched his fist, and slammed it against the wall. "Damn it, that fucking slut Sienna," he roared. He was so angry he could barely breathe. But beneath the anger, a sliver of panic and unease began to creep in. By the time he arrived at my family's house, the feeling had spread throughout his entire body. Sienna hadn't just been good to him, she had been the best. He was certain of it, Sienna definitely loved him. Back in university, he'd gotten into a fight with some guys after drinking. He was outnumbered, and to save him, Sienna had shielded him, taking a blow from a heavy stick. The hit was hard. It broke one of her ribs, and she was in the hospital for a long time. But now she had kissed Julian Rhodes. It could only mean she had really lost her memory and forgotten him. A strange sense of unease settled over him. That feeling vanished the moment he saw Julian. Seeing the four of us looking like a happy family, he rushed forward to block our path. "Sienna," he yelled. I looked up, a flash of surprise in my eyes. The lipstick stain on his shirt collar was bright and distinct, a shade only young girls tended to wear. He stormed over, grabbed Julian by the collar, and snarled, "Have you no shame? Sienna is my girlfriend, what are you doing trying to woo her?" Get lost. Seeing the tension escalate, I stepped forward and shoved Ethan away. "Don't touch him." I stood in front of Julian, glaring daggers at Ethan. Ethan froze. That look in my eyes was exactly the same as the one I'd given him when I protected him in university. But this time, the person I was protecting was Julian Rhodes. "Sienna, I'm your boyfriend, I swear. You're driving me insane, Sienna." His eyes were red, filled with what looked like deep affection. Chapter 8, my expression remained impassive. I looked at him as if he were a complete stranger. "Mr. Montgomery, that's enough. Please stop harassing me. I only have one boyfriend, and that's Julian Rhodes. I love him very much, and I don't want anyone else," I said calmly. Ethan's eyes turned crimson with rage. He raised his hand as if to strike me. Perhaps because my parents were there, he lowered his hand, shot a venomous glare at Julian, then turned, got into his car, and sped off toward the hospital. As soon as he was gone, I turned back to Julian. I gently touched his neck and asked with great concern, "Did that psycho hurt you?" The cool touch of my fingers made Julian flinch, and a ripple of emotion crossed his eyes, but it was gone in an instant. "I have work to do at the office. I should go." After a quick goodbye to my parents, he practically fled. He was gone in a flash. I watched his hurried retreat and chuckled softly. Did Julian's ears just turn red? 3 days later, I couldn't stand being cooped up at home anymore. I got dressed, grabbed my resume, and went to Rhodes Corp. The HR manager took one look at my resume and rushed to find Julian, her face alight with excitement. "Sir, Sienna Shaw, the architect we've been trying to recruit for ages, just walked in. Should we offer her a high salary to get her on board?" "Where is she?" Julian asked, suddenly standing up. "In the break room," the manager replied with a smile. The words were barely out of her mouth when Julian, who had been standing right there, vanished. The HR manager chased after him, only to find the usually composed and formidable CEO standing outside the break room door, hesitant to go in. "Give her whatever salary she asks for. We have to hire her," Julian instructed. The HR manager nodded. A few minutes later, she ran to Julian's office to report her success. "Sir, we've hired her, and she didn't even have any salary requirements. My recruitment ad must have worked wonders to bring in such a big talent." Julian gave her a cool look and corrected her. "She came here for me." After joining Rhodes Corp., I worked diligently, solving several major problems for the company. I even accompanied Julian to a lavish banquet hosted by a foreign tycoon. Not long after we arrived, I saw Ethan. He was wearing a brown suit, a tall, beautiful girl standing by his side. People around him were complimenting him on his wonderful new girlfriend. And that girlfriend was none other than Crystal Vance. I stood on the lawn, my gaze cutting through the crowd to where Ethan stood with the beauty in his arms. I lightly tapped the rim of my wine glass with a finger. He was the center of attention, holding court with arrogant, gleaming confidence. Perhaps he felt my gaze because his eyes swept in my direction. The moment he saw me, his expression turned to one of panic, and he immediately dropped his arm from around Crystal's waist. He left her standing there and hurried toward me. I looked away, impassively pressing the rim of my glass to my lips and taking a sip of the red wine. It had a slightly bitter taste. "Sienna, what are you doing here? I don't remember seeing your name on the guest list." Ethan rushed to explain, repeatedly glancing back at Crystal. When he saw her expression change, his panic intensified. I turned my back on him, refusing to engage. "I couldn't find you, so I asked Crystal to come to the banquet with me. Please don't misunderstand." Ethan continued to explain when I remained silent. But as he was speaking, Crystal walked up to us. "Sienna, you can't misunderstand the relationship between me and Ethan. We're just regular friends," she said, her tone the very picture of gentleness and consideration as she helped him explain. Ethan looked at her with a newfound appreciation in his eyes. Chapter 9, Crystal was cool and elegant, gentle and gracious, not petty and calculating like Sienna. I'm sorry, Mr. Montgomery, but I don't know you very well. It's none of my business who you bring to these events. My voice was cold as I glanced at Crystal. My tone shifted. However, if you harass me again, I will call the police. Sienna, I'm your boyfriend, Ethan insisted, frowning. I shot him an icy glare, my eyes then settling on Julian as he walked toward me. I pushed Ethan away. Excuse me, my boyfriend is here. I walked over and familiarly linked my arm with Julian's. Jules, where did you go? I was waiting for you, I said, tilting my head and smiling sweetly up at his handsome face. Julian looked up and met Ethan's gaze. Just as he was about to answer my question, a group of executives surrounded us. One of them looked at me quizzically. It's rare to see Mr. Rhodes with a date, but this lady looks a little familiar. She's an employee at my company, Sienna Shaw, Julian introduced me. Hearing this, Ethan's head snapped up. He could no longer contain his anger. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the villa's entrance. The crowd watched, stunned. That's right, isn't Sienna Mr. Montgomery's girlfriend? Then this young lady must be. All eyes turned to Crystal. Her face flushed with embarrassment. She gathered her skirt and hurried out of the villa, only to be met by Ethan's accusatory roar at the entrance. Sienna, have you gone too far? Forgetting me is one thing, but have you also forgotten that you're an employee of Montgomery Corp? Why did you go work for Rhodes Corp? Ethan demanded furiously. I've been working at Rhodes Corp for a month since I recovered. I'm a full-time employee now, I stated calmly. Ethan was stunned. He had spent the entire month chasing Crystal, completely oblivious to everything else. The sound of high heels clicking on the pavement echoed as Crystal stormed past us. The noise was loud, and Ethan noticed her. Seeing that she was upset, he didn't hesitate to reach out and stop her. Crystal, where are you going? Ethan's voice softened. Crystal stopped and turned to face him. Her usually pure and gentle expression was now clouded with anger. Mr. Montgomery, what do you take me for? I only agreed to come with you after you begged me for a month, but do you know what people in there are saying about me? They're calling me a homewrecker. I haven't done anything with you, why should I have to suffer this humiliation? Crystal's eyes were red as she tearfully vented her frustrations to Ethan. Who said that? I'll teach them a lesson, Ethan promised, trying to comfort her. I'm leaving. Crystal shook off his hand and walked toward the street. Ethan immediately chased after her, ushering her into the passenger seat of his car. Only after he had done all this did he seem to remember that I was still there. Sienna, I'll explain this to you later, Ethan said before getting into the car. In the passenger seat, Crystal rolled down the window. She glanced at me, her eyes filled with a dismissive, mocking contempt and a hint of triumph. She seemed to be saying that she was the victor and I was the loser. She had Ethan wrapped around her finger like a well-trained dog. The next day, Ethan stormed into Rhodes Corp. This time, however, he wasn't looking for me. He went straight to Julian's office, causing a huge commotion. I grabbed a fruit knife and followed him. Chapter 10. Inside the office, Julian heard the commotion. He looked up at the furious Ethan, then calmly finished signing the last document on his desk. His unflappable demeanor completely enraged Ethan, who slammed his fist on the desk. Everything on the table jumped. Julian Rhodes, you're quite the schemer, aren't you? First, you impersonate me to get close to Sienna, and now you've hired her at your company. What are you playing at? Ethan spat out his accusations, but Julian's expression remained unchanged, which only fueled Ethan's fury. Give her back to me, you thief. Julian had stolen Sienna, stolen her love for him. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Julian's voice was low, his eyes as sharp as a hawk's. Ethan laughed, a bitter, angry sound. He grabbed Julian by the collar. Sienna is mine, don't think you can keep her just because she thinks you're me right now. Sienna belongs to herself. I can't force her to do anything. Julian didn't fight back, but his gaze was resolute. At those words, Ethan punched Julian in the face. The doctor said Sienna will get her memory back this month. When she does, she'll come back to me, I'm the one she loves, Ethan sneered, looking down at him. Julian's eyes darkened. He had asked the doctor, too. This was the last month. Ethan Montgomery, you psycho, get away from him. I got the key to the office from Julian's assistant, unlocked the door, and burst in. Seeing the blood at the corner of Julian's mouth, I rushed over and shoved Ethan hard. I ran to Julian's side and gently touched his face. Jules, does it hurt? Julian didn't speak. He just stared at me. His eyes held a look of terror, as if he was afraid I would disappear. Sienna, stay out of this. I'm going to teach this shameless bastard a lesson today. Ethan lunged toward Julian again. Furious, I pulled out the fruit knife and pointed it at him. You bastard, you dare touch him again, I snarled, my eyes blazing with anger. Ethan froze. Sienna, you're pointing a knife at me. He looked at me in disbelief, his fists clenched. Why are you protecting him like this? Sienna, you're driving me crazy. I'm your boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend like you. A dull ache spread through my chest, and my eyes instantly turned red. Convinced I wouldn't actually stab him, Ethan turned, grabbed a chair, and swung it at Julian. Seeing that Julian wasn't moving to dodge, I ran and stood in front of him. But after a few moments, I felt no pain. Julian had blocked the blow. Blood seeped from his arm. I lunged forward and slashed Ethan's arm with the knife, drawing blood from him as well. Will you just get out of here? If you touch him again, I'm calling the police, I threatened. Seeing me take out my phone, Ethan, despite his frustration, had no choice but to leave. But before he went, he added, Sienna, you'll regret this. I stared at him, forcing back my tears. Regret? I wouldn't. As soon as Ethan was gone, I frantically tended to Julian's wounds. Seeing the bruise already forming on his arm, my eyes welled up. I'm so sorry, Jules, I choked out. I didn't know that psycho would show up. Seeing me cry, he panicked and gently wiped away my tears with his hand. I'm fine. It doesn't hurt, he said earnestly. But why didn't you fight back? I remember you have a black belt in Taekwondo. Taking care of a weakling like Ethan should be easy for you, right? I asked, confused. Getting hit a little is nothing. His eyes were fixed on my face, his voice low and hoarse. A greedy person deserves a little punishment. I stared at him, stunned. Chapter 11, after leaving Rhodes Corp., Ethan went straight to Crystal Vance's university. When Crystal saw the gash on Ethan's arm, she hesitated outside the car for a moment, only daring to get in after she was sure he had calmed down. Don't you think Sienna is an idiot? Why did she have to forget me, of all people? And now she has the nerve to point a knife at me. Reliving the scene, Ethan felt a surge of frustration and pounded the steering wheel several times. Hearing his story, Crystal understood what had happened. Maybe Sienna never loved you that much. Who forgets the person they love? As she spoke, Crystal gently placed her hand on his thigh, her eyes filled with sympathy. If it were me, I would never forget the one I love. And I would never hurt them. Ethan was deeply moved. Crystal was young, beautiful, and so innocent. She was truly 1,000 times better than Sienna. He slowly leaned in, and this time, Crystal didn't pull away. She used her body to comfort him. Ethan lost himself in her gentle embrace. After their tryst, Ethan felt revitalized, younger even. He began to lavish money on Crystal. Hearing she was short on clothes, he bought her new outfits, shoes, and bags. He even bought her a villa. I heard people talking about it as I walked onto the campus. My steps faltered, but only for a moment. Today, I was representing Rhodes Corp as a guest lecturer at my alma mater. I had arrived early to familiarize myself with the equipment. I went to the restroom for a moment, and when I returned, I could hear a few girls talking inside the classroom. Crystal, is it true? Did Mr. Montgomery really buy you a villa? Of course it's true. She has more luxury goods than she knows what to do with. Crystal glanced at her fawning roommates, placed her limited edition designer bag on the table, and chuckled. You guys sure are well informed. As they were chatting excitedly, another girl chimed in. But Crystal, I heard that Mr. Montgomery has a fiancé. A fiancé? Just some woman with amnesia. She's no threat. You probably don't know this, but Ethan Montgomery is head over heels in love with me now. If I asked him to die for me, he'd probably do it, Crystal scoffed. The moment she finished speaking, I walked into the room. Crystal jumped to her feet, her face a mask of terror. What are you doing here? She stammered. I ignored her, walked to the podium, and continued organizing my presentation. Crystal, do you know this professor? She's our guest lecturer. I heard she's from Rhodes Corp and she's an alumna. She's supposed to be a big shot. One of the girls, seeing her reaction, explained. Crystal's face was ashen. She gripped her bag so tightly her knuckles turned white, not hearing a word her friend said. I delivered my lecture flawlessly. The students began to leave, but Crystal remained in her seat. Once the classroom was empty, she walked toward me, her face full of apprehension. Ethan loves me. Don't you dare try to break us up, Crystal said coldly. My hand, resting on the mouse, froze. I stood up straight and looked at the young and beautiful Crystal, letting out a small laugh. Miss Vance, a clear conscience fears no accusations. Buzz, I'm at the school gate. It was a message from Julian. He had been incredibly clingy lately. Before, he wouldn't contact me unless I contacted him first. Now it was like he wanted to be glued to my side. I paid Crystal no more attention, grabbed my bag, and hurried out. When I saw the familiar car, I ran toward it with a smile, waving at the person inside. Jules, he took me to a high-end restaurant, and after dinner, we went to an amusement park. It was lively and fun, and I was having a great time. But suddenly, Julian's expression grew serious. He turned to look at me, hesitated for a long time, his eyes dark and dull. His voice was so low I almost couldn't hear him. Sienna, have you ever considered that I'm not your boyfriend? Chapter 12. I froze, my lips slightly parted. Before I could speak, Julian cut me off. I saw a really nice necklace when I was at the mall, so I bought it for you. He didn't wait for my answer, simply taking it out of the box and carefully fastening it around my neck. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if he were afraid I would refuse. I had seen him in action at the company, decisive and commanding. He rarely smiled. Seeing him so cautious now was a little unsettling. But he seemed to do a lot of things on the way. He had come to the hospital on the way, bought me food and flowers on the way, and now he had bought me a necklace on the way. It's beautiful. I love it, I said, touching the necklace and smiling at him. Seeing that he still looked grave, I pulled him down to sit on a bench. The moment we sat, he took my hand in his dark eyes fixed on me. Have you ever thought that what I said might be true? He whispered. My smile faltered. I looked up at the darkening sky, my own expression growing dim. Jules, I know what I'm doing. Don't worry, I said after a moment, patting the back of his hand reassuringly. I have a request, Julian said seriously. Go on. Can you promise not to throw the necklace away? No matter what you remember, please don't throw it away. There was a pleading note in his voice. Why would I throw away something so beautiful? I clutched the necklace protectively and smiled at his worried face. I'll wear it when I eat, when I sleep, when I shower. I'll wear it everywhere. Hearing this, Julian's expression brightened a little. Come on, let's take a picture. I linked my arm with his, and we took a lot of photos together. I picked a few of the best ones and posted them to my social media feed. That night, Ethan showed up at my door. It wasn't about the photos, it was about Crystal. Sienna, how can you be so vicious? You actually went to Crystal's university just to humiliate her, so you almost drowned once. Did it damage your brain, too? Forgetting me is one thing, but Crystal is such an innocent girl. Why would you bully her? She's usually so strong, but because of you, she's been crying all night. Ethan's face was contorted with a rage more intense than I had ever seen. I bullied her, I said, frowning. She cried, Ethan spat, looking at me with disgust. I lowered my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I took a deep breath. Mr. Montgomery, you keep insisting that you're my boyfriend, that you're my lover, but your actions don't make me feel that way. Ethan was stunned. You're the one who started flirting with Julian Rhodes first, he shot back, finding an excuse. Exactly. So from now on, I'm going to be with Julian Rhodes. I'm going to marry him and spend the rest of my life with him. So please go be with your precious Crystal and leave me alone, I pleaded. Hearing this, Ethan panicked. I forbid it. I love you, Sienna. You can't marry Julian Rhodes. His eyes were bloodshot as he gripped my hand tightly. Love. Do you even know what you're saying? I let out a cold laugh, my eyes welling up. I pointed to my heart. I feel nothing for you in here. Seeing you just makes me sick. You have amnesia you'll remember eventually. Ethan couldn't stand my cold, disgusted gaze. Amnesia? I couldn't help but laugh. I threw him out and slammed the door. The moment it was closed, my eyes filled with tears that I couldn't seem to wipe away. Chapter 13. Sienna, don't do something you'll regret, Ethan shouted from outside the door. I didn't answer. He didn't stay long. He returned to his villa, and the moment he walked in, he kicked over a table in a fit of rage. The loud crash startled Crystal, who was in another room doing a face mask. She rushed out to find Ethan sitting on the sofa, radiating frustration. What's wrong? She asked cautiously. Sienna said she's going to marry Julian Rhodes, but she's supposed to marry me. Do you think she'll ever remember me? The memory of Sienna's disgusted look sent a pang of pain through Ethan's heart. Sienna had never looked at him like that before. Crystal frowned at his words, but she forced herself to sound reassuring. Of course she will. Didn't the doctor say she would? But from what I've heard, she seems quite happy with that Julian Rhodes. One of my classmates saw them at the amusement park, acting just like a real couple. At that, Ethan suddenly remembered the photos Sienna had just posted. He took out his phone and scrolled through her feed. Every single post was about Julian, filled with pictures of the two of them, smiling happily, looking exactly like a real couple. Ethan's hands began to tremble. He had been so focused on pursuing Crystal that he had no idea things between Sienna and Julian had progressed this far. When he and Sienna had first gotten together, she had been the same way, taking pictures with him and posting them every day. She would call him constantly, and if she wasn't calling, she was texting. But now, his phone had been silent for a long time. No calls from Sienna, no texts. It was as if he had vanished from her world. A profound sense of loss struck him like a physical blow. The next morning, he went to wait for me outside the Rhodes Corp building. I saw him as I got out of Julian's car. Julian saw him too. I ignored him, took Julian's hand, and walked into the company with a smile. He didn't follow us, but he lingered nearby. That evening, he couldn't hold it in any longer. He ran up to us, his eyes red, and showed me a photo of the two of us from his phone. In it, I was smiling radiantly. Sienna, look closely, I'm your boyfriend. How can you be laughing and joking with another man? How could you do this to me? He demanded. Julian's expression hardened, and he tightened his grip on my hand. Ethan scrolled through picture after picture of our past, trying to jog my memory, but I just watched him with a cold, detached expression. I'm sorry, Mr. Montgomery, but even if you Photoshop us together, it doesn't make us a couple. The only person I remember is Julian Rhodes. The only thing I know is that Julian Rhodes is my boyfriend, I said calmly. Then I took Julian's hand and walked away. Watching our retreating backs, Ethan's eyes welled with tears. He couldn't accept it. He would never accept it. He drove to the hospital in a frenzy, grabbed the doctor by the collar, and demanded, "You said Sienna would remember me within 3 months. Why can't she remember me now?" The doctor was terrified by his reaction. Mr. Montgomery, in my experience, 3 months is usually the maximum time. If she still can't remember, it's possible Miss Shaw's case is unique and she just needs more time, the doctor explained. How much more time? Ethan roared. Mr. Montgomery, please calm down, the doctor pleaded. Calm down? How can I calm down? My girlfriend is about to marry someone else. How do you expect me to be calm? Ethan yelled. Chapter 14, Mr. Montgomery, given Miss Shaw's condition, you might need to spend more time with her. Take her to places you used to go together. It might help her remember you, the doctor suggested. Useless, and you call yourself the best neurologist in the country. If Sienna doesn't remember me, you can kiss that reputation goodbye. Ethan shoved the doctor aside, spat a final curse, and stormed out. But before he could put any plan into action, his father found him at the villa he shared with Crystal. Ethan was in the middle of drinking away his sorrows, with Crystal in his arms. The sight of his father made him jump to his feet. Dad, how did you? He stammered. Frederick Montgomery slapped his son so hard it silenced him. So this is why Sienna resigned and went to Rhodes Corp, because you found another woman you disgrace. Are you trying to kill me? Do you have any idea how important Sienna is to our company? Frederick was shaking with rage. Dad, it's not my fault. Sienna thinks I'm Julian Rhodes. What was I supposed to do? Ethan said weakly. I know, and I also know you're the one who pushed her into the ocean, Frederick roared. Ethan froze. I'm warning you, you better pray Sienna's father never finds out about this. If he does, he'll pull his investment, and then don't blame me for forgetting we're father and son. Your younger brother is perfectly capable of taking your place. Frederick delivered his final ultimatum. Dad, what are you saying? Ethan couldn't believe it. Frederick didn't waste any more words on him. He shot a cold glare at Crystal and left. As soon as he was gone, Crystal rushed to Ethan's side, frowning. Ethan, what did your father mean? He was just joking, right? Ethan sat on the sofa, completely devastated, not hearing a single word she said. He never imagined that losing Sienna would throw everything into chaos. His heart was in turmoil, and so was his mind. That night, I stared at the dozen missed calls on my phone in silence. Message notifications from Ethan kept popping up. I glanced at them. Sienna, please pick up my call. I have something really important to tell you. There were many more messages after that. I didn't read them. I just turned off my phone and went to sleep. A few days later, I received an email inviting me to an interview for a television program with the promise of a big prize. I recognized the program and immediately accepted. When Julian found out, he looked incredibly worried. On the day of the recording, he suddenly took my hand and pulled me into a tight hug. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "Good luck." I smiled and replied, "I will." When I arrived at the studio, I saw a large screen and a lot of equipment. It looked like it was going to be a live broadcast. The host began the interview, and at one point he asked about my first love. I fell silent. Then, the screen to the side began to play a slideshow of photos and videos of me and Ethan, from the beginning of our relationship to our engagement. I watched without any reaction. "Sienna, do you remember? I proposed to you right here, and the entire city witnessed it. I don't blame you for losing your memory, for forgetting me and mistaking someone else for me, because I have always loved you deeply. You are the only one in my heart," Ethan said, his eyes red and filled with emotion. "In university, I brought you an umbrella when it rained, I brought you food, I took you out. When we graduated, you told me with tears in your eyes that we would be together forever. Don't you remember any of that?" The live chat was flooded with comments praising Ethan's devotion. My parents were in the audience. "Sienna, I have the entire city as my witness. I am your boyfriend. Please believe me," Ethan said, stepping forward to take my hand. I think I remember now," I said, clutching my head. Chapter 15, Ethan's eyes lit up. "Sienna, really? You remember me?" He rushed forward, grabbing my shoulders in excitement, his eyes red. Elsewhere, Julian heard my words and slammed his tablet shut. He stared at a photo of the two of us, his gaze dim. It had all been a beautiful dream, and now it was time for him to wake up. "I'm your boyfriend. Do you remember?" Ethan pressed, his grip on me tightening, his voice growing urgent when I didn't answer. "I remember," I said with a cold laugh. Hearing this, Ethan was so overjoyed he tried to hug me, but I raised my hands to stop him, pressing them against his chest. "I remember that I only agreed to date you after you pursued me for 3 years. I remember how you cried with joy when I said yes. And I remember you promising me a lifetime of devotion with only me by your side. I remember all of it," I said, my eyes welling with tears. "But do you remember any of that?" I asked him. Ethan was speechless. "You said you brought me food and an umbrella in university, but that was only for the first few days we were together. Do you remember what I did for you after that?" I continued to press. Realizing something was wrong, Ethan urged me in a low voice to go home and talk. "Judging by your expression, you probably don't remember. When you were sick, I ran around everywhere for you, staying by your side day and night. At business dinners, I drank for you. I worked myself to the bone handling company matters and cleaning up the messes you made. When you were getting beaten up, I took a blow for you that broke my rib. Do you remember any of it?" I yelled, my eyes red with fury. I had exhausted myself for Ethan's "Sienna, I remember," Ethan said, frantically taking my hand. "You remember?" I raised my hand, my eyes blazing. The screen instantly switched to a photo of Ethan in bed with another woman. The woman, her face hidden, was nestled against his chest like a delicate bird, her neck covered in love bites. It was clearly not me. Ethan's eyes widened in horror. "Sienna, have you no shame? Did you install surveillance cameras?" He hissed, losing his composure. "I have no interest in watching your sordid affairs. That woman sent it to me last night," I said, my eyes red as I glared at him. Ethan's head was spinning. "What are you talking about? Crystal is too innocent to do something like that," he roared, still in denial. "Yes, she's young, she's innocent. And I'm vicious and scheming," I said, my eyes filled with disappointment. Realizing he had misspoken, he tried to salvage the situation, but I took 2 steps back. Forgetting me entirely, Ethan rushed to shut down the live broadcast equipment and dismiss the crew. Then he turned and strode toward me. "Sienna, are you trying to ruin me? We were together for 3 years. Didn't you have any love for me in all that time? How can you be so cruel?" he demanded furiously. "So now you're scared?" I stared at his panicked face and laughed. "Sienna," he reached for my hand. "But when you pushed me into the ocean to make another woman smile, did you ever think about whether I was scared?" I screamed, violently shaking off his hand. In the audience, my father heard this and nearly fainted. That terror, that feeling of suffocation, I still have nightmares about it. I wake up terrified every time. So how can you be so happy? You pursue other women, buy them luxury goods, buy them villas, and even sleep with them. My voice broke as I became more and more distraught. I had given him my heart, and he had treated it like a game. Chapter 16, Ethan was left speechless. I was never serious about Crystal, but what about you and Julian Rhodes? What right do you have to say that to me? You slept with him, didn't you? He retorted, finding a new line of attack. Whether I did or not, what does it have to do with you? I sneered. The Sienna you knew died the moment you pushed me into the ocean. From that point on, my life has nothing to do with you. My gaze turned cold and distant. Seeing the indifference in my eyes, Ethan felt a sharp pain in his chest. He grabbed my hand, still trying to argue. I'm not breaking up with you. I'll dump Crystal if I have to. I don't love her. I love you. 3 years of history were rooted in his heart. He had always believed that I would love him forever. I tried to pull my hand away, but this time he held on tight. My father, seeing this, came onto the stage, pulled me behind him, and slapped Ethan hard across the face. You bastard, have you no decency? If you ever come near my daughter again, I'll break your legs, my father roared, then led me away. As I left, Ethan started to follow, but his phone rang. You disgrace, you can't even handle something this simple as of today. I, Frederick Montgomery, do not have a son like you're on your own. Frederick yelled into the phone and hung up before Ethan could say a word. It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over him, chilling him to the bone. He had lost Sienna, and now his father had disowned him. He staggered back to the villa, only to find Crystal packing her bags. He tried to stop her. What are you doing? Where are you going? He asked, frowning. I'm not the one leaving. You are. This is my house. Crystal's usual gentle demeanor was gone, replaced by a cold mask as she shook off his hand. Ethan looked down and realized she was packing his clothes. Crystal, what is the meaning of this? Ethan couldn't believe the pure, kind Crystal could be so cruel. What does it mean? You've ruined my reputation and gotten me expelled from university, and you're asking me what this means. You're broke now anyway, so there's no need for me to pretend anymore. Get out of my house, right now. Crystal pointed to the door, her face a cold mask. Ethan was stunned. Crystal, you said you loved me, he said, still in disbelief. Love? How much is love worth? Sienna loved you, and you still pushed her into the ocean. I heard she's afraid of water and can't even swim. It's a miracle she survived. But I'm not as stupid as she is, Crystal sneered. Looking at the ferocious woman before him, Ethan couldn't believe she was the same Crystal he knew. You tricked me, he realized, grabbing her by the throat in a rage. Just as Crystal was about to suffocate, another man burst in and shoved Ethan away. Don't touch Crystal, he yelled. Ethan stared at the intimate pair, and his world crumbled. He recognized the man. He was the son of a real estate tycoon and a friend of his younger brother. He never imagined that Crystal had already secured a backup plan. Damn it, I'll kill you both. The series of blows had completely broken Ethan. He lunged at the man, his eyes red, but the next second he was pinned to the ground. The man had brought bodyguards. They beat Ethan up and threw him out of the villa. His brother even sent him a taunting text, saying that he would reclaim all the gifts Ethan had given Crystal, including the villa, and that he would be taking his place in the company. Ethan was on the verge of a complete breakdown. He needed a place to stay. He called all of his friends, but no one answered. Not even Jasper Gray. Ethan Montgomery had lost everything. Chapter 17, his eyes turned red. He was truly homeless. No friends, no brothers, no lover. Ethan suddenly remembered a time right after university graduation. He had gotten into trouble, putting someone in the hospital, and his father had kicked him out. It was Sienna who had helped him, who had guided him through that difficult time. Back then, a single call or text from him, and Sienna would have rushed to his side without hesitation. Sienna, Ethan had been sitting outside my house for hours. When I finally came out, he scrambled to his feet and called my name. I stopped and stared at the pathetic figure before me. He had been beaten black and blue, the light in his eyes was gone, and his clothes were caked with dirt. Mr. Montgomery, can I help you? I asked, my face devoid of expression. Hearing me call him Mr. Montgomery, Ethan's eyes welled with tears. He knew there was no going back. Sienna, if only you hadn't lost your memory. We would have been married by now. Ethan choked out. I let out a cold laugh. He made it sound so simple. I remembered you the whole time, but from the moment I woke up in the hospital until today, you never showed an ounce of remorse. Ethan, you've broken my heart into a million pieces. Now, the only thing I feel when I see you is disgust. People who betray true love deserve to swallow 1,000 needles, I said icily. Ethan swayed on his feet. Sienna, why? Why did you pretend to have amnesia to trick me? And why did you choose Julian Rhodes? Ethan broke down, his eyes red. The moment you pushed me, I was done with you. I wanted you to feel the pain I felt, I said, my own eyes turning red, filled with nothing but hatred for him. In that emergency room, all I could hear were the sounds of medical equipment, and all I could feel was helplessness and rage. The sound of Ethan and Crystal's laughter echoed in my mind. Torn between life and death, I chose to live. From the first moment I opened my eyes in that hospital bed and saw him, I knew he had no regrets. I hated him. I knew he was proud and arrogant, and that his one consistent failure was Julian Rhodes. He couldn't stand the mention of his name. At first, I didn't expect Julian to play along, but I took one step toward him, and he ran the rest of the way to me. I knew I was using him, and that it wasn't fair. So I went to work at his company, solved problems for him, and did everything I could to make him happy. But after the television interview, he stopped responding to my messages. Sienna, do you hate me that much? Enough to torture me like this? Ethan continued to plead. Please don't ever come looking for me again, I said, having no time for him. I got into my car and drove toward Julian's house. Not long after I left, Ethan was taken away by the police. My father had reported him for attempted murder. He didn't resist. He confessed to the crime. By the time I reached Julian's house, I had heard from my colleagues that he had been missing all afternoon. He wasn't answering his phone or responding to texts. This was a first for them. Julian was a notorious workaholic. I rang the doorbell several times, but there was no answer. Worried something had happened, I tossed my bag over the wall, climbed onto my car, and scaled the wall into his yard. The door to the villa was unlocked. I opened it carefully and called out, Jules, Jules. I'm coming in. But when I walked into the living room, I froze. On one wall hung a large photograph. The woman in the photo was unmistakably me, from a picture he and I had taken in university. I stood in front of the photo for a long time. To be honest, I hadn't interacted much with Julian in university. I only knew he was the most popular guy on campus and a top student. But on graduation day, he had come to find me to take a picture together. He had even changed into a suit for the occasion. At the time, I had just thought it was a photo between classmates. The photograph was hung directly opposite the sofa, impossible to miss. Chapter 18, I searched the whole house and finally found Julian in the second-floor bedroom. He reeked of alcohol, slumped on the floor by the bed, a wine bottle in one hand and a picture frame clutched to his chest. His shirt was half unbuttoned, revealing his firm, pale chest. I reached for the wine bottle and he let it go. But when I tried to take the picture frame, his eyes snapped open. His dark, deep-set eyes stared straight at me, clouded with a drunken haze. Don't touch it, he said, his voice raspy. His protectiveness only made me more curious. Can I see it, please? I asked with a smile. No, he said, his brow furrowing. Seeing how stubborn he was, I didn't press him. I helped him to his feet, laid him down on the bed, took off his shoes, and went to get him a glass of water. While he was drinking, I flipped the picture frame over. It was the photo I had taken when I kissed his cheek. What was so precious about this? Julian, why are you drinking so much? This isn't like you, I said, my voice suddenly serious as I looked at him. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed, but his eyes never left my face. I was taken aback. I understood the fiery, intense look in his eyes. He looked away, put down the glass, and placed the picture frame in a drawer. His expression returned to its usual coldness. I heard you got your memory back, he said quietly. You must remember that I'm not your boyfriend then. I was silent for a moment. I didn't know how to tell him I had never lost my memory. Shouldn't you be with Ethan Montgomery now? He asked, his head bowed, his voice barely a whisper. I never actually lost my memory. I'm sorry I used you, I confessed, my eyes filled with guilt. Julian stared at me stunned. I came here today to tell you the truth. At first, I just planned to use your name to get back at him. I never expected to drag you into this to get you hurt, I said, unable to meet his eyes, my head lowered. So, did you break up with Ethan Montgomery? Julian asked. I looked up at him. The moment he pushed me into the ocean, we were over. We will never be together again, I replied. Good, he said. Julian's eyes suddenly brightened, and the color returned to his face. Are you hungry? I'll make you something to eat, Julian said, glancing at the time on his watch. He got out of bed and looked at me. I'm not hungry, I said, completely bewildered by his question. You're not angry? I asked, confused. I'm not angry. He swayed as he started to walk out of the room. I quickly pulled him back and made him lie down, wanting him to rest. I thought he was hungry and was about to go buy him some food, but he grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the bed. Thump! My face landed squarely on his firm chest. There was no fabric between us, and the heat from his skin seared my cheek. I quickly pushed myself up with my hands, my face flushed. I'm sorry, Mr. Rhodes. You pulled me and I lost my balance, I whispered. I prefer it when you call me Jules. You saw the photo in the living room, right? You should know by now that I like you. I'm not asking for an answer right away. You can take your time to think about it, Julian said, his sharp, handsome features softening. I lowered my eyes. You've liked me since university? Yes. The moment the word left his lips, I leaned in and kissed his soft, warm lips. The taste of wine filled my mouth, and I felt a little dizzy myself. Chapter 19, the moment our lips met, Julian's pupils contracted sharply. This was our first real kiss. The other time, I had only kissed his cheek. He raised a hand to the back of my head, deepening the kiss. After a moment, he rolled over, gently pinning me beneath him, and began to kiss me with a desperate, hungry passion, like a wolf. The air in the room grew thick and hot. Jules, Jules, I gasped, my tongue numb. I placed my hands on his chest, my face burning. Aren't we moving a little too fast? Julian's eyes were dark and filled with a lingering tenderness. Sorry, I think I've had a little too much to drink, he said, but his body pressed closer, his arms wrapping around my waist as he held me and drifted off to sleep. I struggled for a moment, but I couldn't move. I turned my head to look at him. His features were sharp and defined. He looked like he was really asleep. Since I couldn't leave, I ended up spending the night at Julian's house. The next morning, I rolled over and fell straight into a warm embrace. I opened my eyes and saw Julian lying beside me. But on closer inspection, I saw he had changed into a fresh set of clothes and had already washed his face. I scrambled out of bed, but my movement woke him. He reached out and caught my hand just as I was about to get up. I made breakfast, he said after a moment's hesitation. Okay, I'll be right there. I just need to wash my face. I ran into the bathroom and found a new set of toiletries already laid out on the counter. Julian must have been up for a while. When I came out, Julian was waiting for me by the door. Jules, you can go ahead and eat, I said with a smile. I wanted to wait for you, Julian said, his expression calm, but I saw his ears turn red. Julian always seemed so serious and composed, but I never knew his ears turned red so easily. So, are we boyfriend and girlfriend now? Julian asked suddenly after we finished eating. I smiled and nodded. Of course. Julian's thin lips pressed together, the corners twitching into a small smile. After breakfast, Julian told me to look around the house while he cleaned up the kitchen. I glanced into the kitchen and saw the food containers from the other day. Julian must have made that meal himself. I walked into the living room and took in the decor. It was all cool tones, and it seemed like Julian lived here alone. On the living room table were some note cards. They looked familiar. I picked one up and my expression froze. I slipped one of the cards into my bag. Jules, something's come up. I have to go, I called out to the kitchen. But just as my hand touched the doorknob, Julian was right behind me. He pressed me against the door and gave me a long kiss. Come back soon, he said, his eyes fixed on mine. I left the villa in a daze, my head still spinning. When I got home, my father told me that Ethan had been arrested. I was silent for a moment, then nodded and went upstairs. I pulled out a large box and took out a pile of gifts from inside. I had only ever opened one of them. I had assumed they were delivered to the wrong address and had been waiting for someone to claim them. But now, I took out the note card from the box and compared it to the one I had taken from Julian's house. The handwriting was identical. Since university, Julian had sent me a gift for every one of my birthdays. The card always had the same simple message, "Happy birthday." except for the year I got together with Ethan. That year, the card had an extra line, "I hope you'll be happy." The gifts were all expensive and thoughtful. High heels, dresses, a crystal music box. I picked up my phone and called Julian. "Jules," I said with a smile, "let's get married." "Okay," came the immediate reply from the other end. Chapter 20, the first time Julian Rhodes saw Sienna Shaw was at a music club performance. Sienna was in the audience, listening to the music. The summer night was filled with the chirping of cicadas, mingling with the melodious sounds from the stage. Sienna stood there, waving two glow sticks with wild enthusiasm. She had long hair, wore a blue t-shirt and jeans, and her skin was fair. Her eyes were bright and beautiful, and she radiated a vibrant, sunny energy. Julian was captivated in an instant. He was standing right behind her. In her excitement, Sienna took a step back and stumbled right into his arms. "Oh, sorry, I got a little too excited," she said, flashing him a smile. It was a brilliant, sweet smile. Julian was completely lost. After that, he searched for her, wanting to ask her name. But just as he found her, his family took him abroad. He had to take a 2-year leave of absence from school. By the time he returned, Sienna was with Ethan Montgomery. He heard that she had even been hospitalized because of him. Hearing this drove him mad. He went alone to find the group of guys who had hurt Sienna and beat them until they begged for mercy and agreed to apologize to her. Only then did he stop. He sent her a gift every year on her birthday, but he never let her see him. Until this year, when he saw that Ethan had proposed to Sienna. He had lost all hope and was ready to let go. He stayed home and drank all night. The necklace he had prepared for her birthday, this year remained unsent. But one night, a client invited him to a bar. He had a few drinks and was about to leave. But then, Sienna appeared before him like an angel. She ran toward him with a smile, threw her arms around him, and called him Jules with such intimacy. He was stunned for a long time, convinced he was dreaming. He didn't dare to touch her, afraid that if he did, the dream would shatter. It wasn't until Ethan showed up that he realized it wasn't a dream. Sienna had amnesia. She had mistaken him for Ethan, for her boyfriend. He thought it was his chance, but he hesitated. He knew how much Sienna loved Ethan. He knew he would have to leave eventually. But when he heard she was in the hospital, he couldn't stop himself from going to see her. Sienna looked so frail, her old energy gone, the light in her eyes dimmed. Julian's heart ached for her. He suddenly couldn't bear the thought of letting her go. Ethan couldn't take care of Sienna. Maybe he could. But he asked the doctor. The doctor said Sienna would regain her memory within 3 months. He counted down the days until he would have to leave, taking Sienna to every place he could think of, hoping to leave behind a few more memories of himself in her life. But when he finally heard from Sienna's own lips that her memory had returned, he was torn. He didn't want to let go, but he wanted Sienna to be happy. But when he woke up from his drunken stupor, he saw Sienna. She was just as bright and beautiful as she had been in university, looking at him with concern in her eyes. Sienna told him she had never lost her memory. He was shocked at first, but seeing the guilt on her face, he was actually relieved. Relieved that Sienna hadn't lost her memory, and relieved that Sienna had chosen him. As long as he could be with Sienna, he would do anything. Later, when Sienna told him she wanted to get married, he was so overwhelmed with emotion that for a moment, he couldn't speak. But he quickly recovered and agreed. They had a grand wedding, so grand that everyone in the city knew about it. He wanted the whole world to know that Sienna belonged to him. Until now, Julian looked at Sienna sleeping in his arms. His expression was gentle as he pulled her closer and leaned in to kiss her lips. "Sienna, I love you," Julian whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too," Sienna murmured with a smile. Julian's wish had finally come true, and Sienna found her lifelong happiness.